And we're live.
Hey, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to Leadership Detectives. So we're back here on a crisp day in April in the UK. And between Neil and myself, our diaries are crazy. We're really busy, but we're never too busy to talk to you. So Neil, good to see you. How are you?
I'm fantastic, mate. Yeah, no, loving it. Loving the fact that we've got so many great interviews going on at the moment. And today's going to be no exception. I'm delighted to welcome our brightest and most colourful guest to date, Jay Trestain, one of the global leaders at IBM. How are you today?
I'm brilliant, thank you, Neil. All the more better for having the opportunity to speak to you and Albert today. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
It's great to see you. And I'm just the colour. I love that. I haven't seen a pink office chair before. I mean, that must bring smiles to people's faces when you go on to video calls with people.
I'd like to think so. They either smile or question my sanity, but either way, I'm delighted with the response. But yeah, I think we were just chatting before we came online. I love bringing a bit of colour and fun to work. I think it helps lighten the tone. Doesn't matter how challenging things are. I think there's always an opportunity to smile, makes people feel better.
Yeah.
So to our audience, if anybody wants to know where the chair comes from and how you can get one, just ask in the comments, and I'm sure Jay will share with you guys.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So Jay, really good to see you. We haven't seen you for a few years, right? So for people that don't know, we know Jay from many years ago when Neil and I were in our corporate worlds. Jay was a bright and shiny then, and now you've just gone from strength to strength, which is fantastic. But let's let people know a little bit about you, Jay. If somebody was introducing you onto stage, who would that be? And how would they introduce you? What would they say about you?
Oh, I love that question. And I kind of like doing it a bit left field, because the obvious thing to start with is, well, I work for IBM and I'm a global leader in our business and that kind of stuff. But actually, I like putting people on the back foot. One of the biggest things is I'm also a part-time farmer. I'm a sheep midwife. Yeah. I'm a mum to a gorgeous little sassy pants girl called Dora. But yeah, I try not to be so typical. There's many parts to who I am. But yeah, being at IBM is one of those things. I've been here for, I think, 15 years now, but I don't like admitting it, because the reality is I still think of myself as being the graduate that you both know. Actually, that's quite a few years ago now, and I don't like admitting that to myself.
So you're in lambing season now, right?
We've just finished. Yeah, we had I think 52 lambs out of 40 ewes, and
wow.
So February is always a really brilliant month, when it's horrible weather and really muddy and cold, but you've got the beautiful little lambs coming out. It's just, yeah, it's a lovely balance of dark and miserable and joyful new life. It's lovely.
So and who would you have introduce you on stage? Who would be the ideal person that you would like to be the compere that introduces you?
The person that leaps to mind is Michelle Obama. I mean, who wouldn't, first off? But I just find that woman so incredibly powerful and inspiring, and so authentic and down to earth, that I don't think it doesn't matter who you are, she'll have a point of commonality to make you feel at ease, and she's just somebody I want to be friends with, let alone be introduced on stage. But yeah, I'd love that. That would, if in some random parallel universe that happens, I'll be a very happy girl.
Okay, brilliant. That's a great answer. And you reached out to us on LinkedIn through a comment that we made, and just and we kind of followed it up with a few conversations. But what was it that you wanted to come on and talk to and share with the leaders that are listening on this podcast?
So I think there's so many different angles around leadership, and what we don't often talk about is about being a leader when times are really tough, both as a employee but also as a manager or a leader of people or a leader of business. And as somebody that, in addition to being a part-time sheep farmer, I've got some challenges outside of work that make being present challenging sometimes, if not impossible, actually. How do you manage all of those things? So it was really, I don't hear lots of people talking about that, and I'd love to have the opportunity to talk a little bit more about, you know, it's okay asking for help, and how can you be a leader and inspire others when actually you're feeling pretty vulnerable yourself.
So you said leading in tough times,
Mm.
and I know in our preparation discussions with you, you were a bit more personal than that as well, which said when you've got stuff going on, right?
Mm.
And so to our audience here, guys, we've not touched on this topic before, right? We've all made an assumption of where a leader is in their life and that everything's rosy and it's all, but what Jay brings to us is a reality that says, guess what, leaders are people too, and they've got stuff going on. So we'd like to come at both those angles, right? We'd like to come at the angle that says, how does a leader lead in tough times when they've got stuff going on? And they've got to think about themselves, but they've also got to think about how to be an effective leader, right? So that they're the kind of things we can cover here. So we got kind of 25 minutes to go through that here. Where would you want to go first, Jay? Where do you think we should talk about?
Well, let me tell, if you don't mind, I'll tell a bit of a story so people can understand what, when I'm saying, you know, going through a bit of a tough time, let's give a bit of colour to that. Because the reality is, I think most people in their lives at some point or another will face challenges. And this isn't a competition of who's going through the most stuff, you know, it's all relative. And but just to help people understand a little bit of my frame of reference and my experience, I've gone through about 4 or 5 years of pretty traumatic things, including the very unexpected death of my mum. And I found her and had post-traumatic stress as a result of that, through to more recently my husband being diagnosed with cancer, and it's treatable to the extent that we can control it. It's not curable. I'm a mum, you know, as well, and I work full time, and as well as all of the other things that we like to do to keep ourselves out of mischief. So I'm on the board of directors for my daughter's academy trust, the farmers I keep mentioning because it's such a passion project of mine. But I think the big thing for me is that emotional upheaval. Cancer is a big thing for a lot of people, and I certainly completely did not understand of the gross impact that cancer has on a family. And so I'm really fortunate in that my husband's cancer is treatable, and he on some days is a completely, you know, normal, I don't like using the word normal, but is able to do lots of things. On other days he can't get out of bed, and there's no predicting what that is and when that will strike. So we have to be very fluid and agile as a family to manage that. Similarly, we made a decision way before his cancer diagnosis that he would be the primary caregiver for our daughter, to enable me to really focus on my career. I've always been very career minded, as I think you both know. I was pestering both of you for all of the insights. I remember, teach me when
yes,
changed. So we made these really big decisions, and yet life gets in the way. So that's my kind of frame of reference, is that emotionally that's a big deal as a time, the logistics of dealing with immunotherapy treatments. He's had to have his driving license revoked, so I'm the wheels of the family, living in a rural area. There's all of these little things that you don't necessarily think about or ask questions about or know about until you're doing it yourself, that all impact how I turn up at work. And I think why I feel so passionately about this is I've been given the opportunity to write my own rule book on how I'm a leader in our business. It's enabling me to really have a fulfilling career and pursue my career without having to make a choice. It's not my family looking after my husband and my daughter or IBM. I can do both things, and I'm really I feel really privileged to be able to do that. So if I could give people the confidence and some tips and tools to take that back if they're having similar challenges, some questions to ask, some things to explore, then I would feel really positive about this.
So what because there's two aspects to this. There's how you handle it as a leader, and
Absolutely.
how you maybe compartmentalize things, or however you handle it. And then there's what you need from your team and how you articulate that to them as well. So can we just explore both of those? So how would you suggest or recommend, or what have you learned of how to handle it when you've still got a job to do and you've still got to lead?
So I think I'll start with the story, because this has taken a lot of practice to get right, and I really didn't get it right to begin with. I had this real I've described it as a bit of a God complex, and that's the closest thing that I can describe it to. If leaders of an organization, particularly a big corporate, look and sound and say like this, and I was given a leadership position that was a massive step up, and it just so happened to coincide with my mum passing away. And I put on a real front, and I told myself I needed to carry on and put a brave face on it. And my world was crumbling around me. And it got to the point where I got my team, who all live in different parts of the world. It was a remote call. I got on the phone and I said, I need some help. I can't do this. And I was absolutely terrified. And this is my reports, that I was being vulnerable, that I was their leader, and all of a sudden they're going to start questioning my sanity and my ability to do the job. And actually quite the opposite happened. Instead of any of those things, they all quietly took in turns to share a piece of vulnerable news or information about them. And all of a sudden we had this kind of circle of trust. And it was the most magical moment for me that made me realize that I don't need to pretend to be anything that I'm not. If I'm 100% me all of the time, that's more than enough. And we just nailed it. That team was one of my career highlights. And was the stepping stone for me that, actually letting people in is not a bad thing. To give people the benefit of the doubt that if they are understanding of what you're going through, they can help make accommodations, flexibilities, compromises to help you be effective and positive without judging you for missing that call because it's the school run, or not up because something's thrown up on your shoes and you wasn't expecting it. It's that vulnerability that really started making the difference.
Yeah, because you answered the question before I asked it, Jay. I was going to say, what does your team know about your situation, right? But you've answered it because you
everything. Yeah, everything.
I was then going to say, would you put a label on what you just did? But you just called it vulnerability, right? So is that how you'd label what you did there?
I certainly felt vulnerable in the moment, but actually I think I've reframed it since then, because in my mind, being vulnerable, it can generate and be a catalyst for lots of positivity. But for a lot of people, being labelled as vulnerable can be a position of weakness. And sometimes if I'm feeling vulnerable, being called vulnerable is not helpful for me. Yeah. So I reframe that to be more personable and open and transparent, and bringing all of myself to work all of the time. And that, if I think about that when I'm having a really good day, that means we're fun, it's dynamic, people enjoy spending time with me, but it also means they know that, usually there's a kid or an animal flying into a call. And actually the pandemic has been a bit of a leveler for that, because lots of people have had the same kind of challenges, and that's been a really beautiful experience for some people. Yeah. Not to gloss over the trauma and the tragedy of what's been going on around us. Yeah. So I like to think of it more that it's, yes, being vulnerable is part of it, but I think being open is more of a positive spin for me.
And so did you said your team reacted to that in a positive way? They all engaged. Yeah. And they said, was there anyone who felt uncomfortable with you being open and vulnerable and sharing that with you?
Yeah, brilliant question. No, because the only person that it came as a surprise to was me. They all knew stuff was going on. They all knew me well enough to know that I wasn't myself. And actually, it was a relief to them that I was being honest and kind of admitting that I needed some help. And the beautiful thing was, they behind the scenes were picking up the slack anyway. So me just saying, you know what, can we carry on like this, was a relief for them, because they felt that they were being covered. They weren't doing anything surreptitiously. And so just relief, Neil. There was absolutely no backlash for me of being vulnerable and open. Quite the opposite. And in fact, that was such a defining moment for me. I have it written down in my diary, and it gets translated to each year of the anniversary of when that happened. And I carry that with me when I go into new roles. And I've had 2 or 3 new roles since that time. But there it becomes this, as a leader of a business, when you're meeting new people, walking in as part of the first meeting and just kind of go, oh, by the way, my husband's got cancer, probably isn't the introduction. There is this element of earning the emotional right to share like that.
Yeah.
People don't want to, and that's absolutely fine. It's a personal choice. But for me, it's building that relationship and rapport, and that's true with my clients, with my partners, and internally to IBM, building that rapport so they know exactly who Jay is. I'm the same person I am right with you, as with work, with my family, with my friends. And for me, that earns me the right to ask tough questions, be flexible, and manage all of the various pressures that life throws.
Okay.
Before we move on to the team piece, I want to stay on this actually, Jay, and I don't want to overdo it, but I think it's really important. I just want to get a feeling for when you went into that and decided to be that open. What was your objective? Was it, I'm at the end of my tether and I just need to dump this, or was it maybe I'll come out with a different output? What was your objective going into that?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. You know what, Albert, I don't think I had an objective. It was pure. I don't think I felt like I had any other option. I felt like I was failing, and I recognised there was a lot of pressure on the business unit that I was leading at the time, that we needed to perform. It was a sales-driven organisation, and I felt like I was failing that business, and that the only fair thing to do would be to ask for help, because, you know, we'd all fail together. It wouldn't be an individual, you know, it wouldn't, the blame wouldn't go on to one individual or another. It was a team thing. So it was desperation, and it felt like I had no other option, if I'm honest.
But you know, that to me makes it even more powerful from the conversation we're having here, right?
Yeah.
Because that is you being human.
Yeah.
And this is what Neil and I talk about all the time, right?
And that's the thing. Why it's personally impacted me so much was out of, and you know what? I can tell you where I was sat. I can take myself to that place with acute clarity. Out of that real horrible period, honestly, it was just like a revelation. And I'll be forever grateful for that team for responding in the way they did. Yeah. But it was the absolute validation I needed, that, well, who am I pretending to be? Why am I doing that? The only person I'm putting it as a disadvantage was myself. And that was the biggest lesson I've ever had as a leader.
I think it's a really important point you made earlier as well, which is they knew.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
We put on this front, and we think that people don't know, but people know. But the question I've got is actually, what about your boss? So in that scenario, right, your team, you're sharing with your team and help them understand. But what kind of conversation did you have upwards?
So I had a much more pragmatic conversation with them in the first instance, which was, and again, for context, being in a global organisation, my manager, I hadn't physically met that manager at the time, but we had a very, very good relationship. She'd spent a lot of time breaking down barriers through phone calls and things. So we had a good relationship, but it wasn't face to face. So at that point, I'd shared the pragmatic side of what was happening. So they absolutely had an awareness, and actually her management style was exceptional. And she created time and space for me in whatever way I needed. I subsequently learned that messages had gone round to my kind of immediate peers and in-country leaders to let them know that just, you know, just keep an eye on Jay. She needs some time and space. Everything's fine. She's communicating with us, but I learned she kind of created a bit of a safety blanket for me, which was so reassuring, that I knew my kind of village, as I call it, my work village, had just swung into action. And, you know, I'd get the occasional reach out. So very pragmatic on my point. She let me take the lead, but she created a safe space around me to do what I needed to do. And that continues to this day.
Bit of a risky question here then, Jay. Do you think that would have been any different if she was a he?
Oh, probably. I think I've had various different experiences with personal trauma. And I've had one really bad experience where I had a family member pass away, and it was expected, but you know, there was an element of time for bereavement, and I had some administration jobs to do as part of it. And my male manager at the time asked, well, couldn't somebody else do that? And I remember thinking at the time, what an incredibly insensitive question to be asked. Fortunately, that's one occasion out of, unfortunately, I've had disproportionate number of traumatic events, and mostly people have been fantastic about it. I think there is an element that, as a woman, being led by a woman, I certainly feel more able to share. Now, there are some exceptions. I'm managed currently by an amazing guy, and he has all of the warts and stories, and has had me, you know, in floods of tears post diagnosis of my husband. You know, in fact, I think he might have been the first person I actually spoke to. So I don't want to characterize this by gender. I think it very much depends on what people's frame of reference are, if they've experienced something similarly. But I do feel women more generally, and being a woman, I naturally feel more open to be more transparent when I'm vulnerable.
It's interesting, actually, because what you've described, and it kind of does lead on to the second part of what we wanted to talk about, was how leaders can create that environment where it's okay and enable people. Because what you've just described is the lady you were talking about, now this guy you're talking about, sounds like it's not a one-time thing. They've created an environment where you can have that open conversation and so on. So what is, and that's what I just want to drill in a little bit. So what is it a leader can do to create the environment where it's okay for employees to be vulnerable, employees to be personable, open? So what could a leader, what sort of things, what prescription would you give to the leaders listening on this?
I think the key element is trust. Trust. If your employees do not trust you, they will not be open with you. If there is a shadow of doubt that them being vulnerable and sharing information with you will somehow end up in some repercussion, you will not be successful. So how you build trust, therefore, is going to be very much on an individual basis. There isn't a recipe or rule book for building trust, because we're all individuals, we're all people, and we respond very differently. You know, for some, my colourful and very loud way of being is like the antithesis of sharing. You know, they don't want to do that, and that's fine. But you need to spend the time at an individual level, understanding who your people are, know who they are, ask questions, and over time, if they're willing to be open, they will. But remember, you know, don't just pay it lip service. Listen to what they're telling you. Write down the names of significant others, dogs, pets, children, what they're doing at weekends, and make the time to be interested. And out of that comes trust and respect and more of a personable relationship. And if you can do that, I guarantee the rest will follow.
I think the magic that you've applied to it, Jay, is you said it right up front. The same Jay is in the office, is on the conference call, is in the kitchen, is on the farm, is at the school, right? It's the same Jay.
Yes.
And we're in a time now where I think people need to realize you don't have to be a different person at work.
it's exhausting, even trying to, when we're, you know, just the very nature of homeschooling for those people that have got parents through the pandemic. I mean, cool. I'm so pleased I'm not a teacher. I have so much respect for teachers that I just, you know, and I think what gave me a bit of a head start, and I've been able to filter that out within my kind of network at IBM, is there are pragmatic tooling type things that you can do to help make this easier. You don't have to be wearing your heart on your sleeve the whole time. So for example, my immediate reports and those that need to know and have access to me, they have access to my calendar, and I block my time. So if there's things going on that I really can't do, they know you can't block time because it's the school run, it's a chemo appointment, it's a, you know, I'm sorting lambs out, or whatever the case may be. Therefore, and I set rules of engagement. So I'm happy to do evening calls if it's important. You can't find me elsewhere in the day, but these are the kind of the conditions of satisfaction that you need to apply first, and then I'm all yours, no problem. So there are things that you can do. Similarly, having really nice rigor around video calls. Nobody likes being sat on back-to-back calls for 8 hours a day. It's painful. And when are you going to eat and drink and go for a wee? So, you know, schedule them for 45 minutes. If you need an hour, schedule them for 45 minutes. You're consciously giving people 15 minutes gap in between. Similarly, if you're just talking business all the time, schedule some downtime. When back in the wonderful heady days of being able to go for a Thursday night drink or have a coffee or whatever the case may be, we just don't have the opportunity for that. So schedule time with your team to talk in a more relaxed way. Play a game. I don't know, it's kind of difficult to sometimes break down those barriers via WebEx, but if you persevere, you really can recreate that magic. And this comes not from a pandemic leader, this comes from you know, I've led teams for years now where all of my reports are out of the country, so we physically can't be in the same space. So there are real practical things you can do to recreate that magic and build that trust. So don't let distance be an object.
Yeah, and there's two things you've said in here. One of them is about this blocking your diary and scheduling time, because the key, and it's interesting, I work with so many people coaching leaders, and it's almost like they've got these standards and rules in their heads, but they don't share it with anyone. You know, how does their team know that they're not available between these times, and that, you know, that it's okay to schedule a call in the evening within these parameters? So they're then disappointed because, well, how the hell my boss has put a meeting in my diary?
Exactly.
But the boss didn't know that was a bad time.
Yeah,
so that's really, really important about, you know, set your standards and rules and share it and make sure it works.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, people are not telepathic. And the other thing is, if you kind of come into it assuming the best, so you know, put yourself in that, if you're worried about what people might say, flip the war game with yourself. So if your employee said to you, I'm blocking this time out of the day because I want to pick up my daughter or my son from school, or I just need to go for a walk. Like, brilliant. I'm so pleased you're making time for yourself. Then why are you fearful that if you had the same transparency that you would be judged for slacking or whatever? And it's just not the case. You trust people and they'll trust you in return.
Your advice is just outstanding here. It really is great stuff. We could have given you the script here, actually. Seriously, either that or you've listened to all of our previous recordings. But Jay, you're right on. You're right on.
And one of the thoughts that was going through my head, actually, which I'll share with you because I wasn't going to mention it, but I will mention it now. So when we were talking about bring yourself to work, you know, so bring the person at home to work. What went through my head was, what happens if you're an arsehole at home? Bring the arsehole to work.
My money, Neil, is that they're already an arsehole at work.
Yeah, probably, yeah. But I was thinking, actually, most people, although my wife might argue with me, but most people aren't arseholes at home. You know, they're human, they play with their kids, they've got mates. So they're probably, that was just, this thought was going through my head.
So look, we've covered some great ground here. We've certainly gone along the time fast here, like crazy. We could probably do a quick a couple of quick fires, Neil, and
Yeah,
then
I'd like to
probably
do
wrap
that. I
it
think that
up.
would be
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
So let's just do a couple of quick fires. Who would be your leadership role model?
My current boss, Justin Ablett.
Okay.
So
for those that know Justin and listening in, take note.
Yeah, if you might want to be putting your applications in for jobs to work for him.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's
okay, if you were going to gift a leadership book to anyone, what book would you gift to them?
Plan B by Sheryl Sandberg, and it's how to kind of recover post-trauma. It's excellent.
Yeah, it is. I've read it. Yeah, it's very, very good. Yeah.
Fantastic. So people go off this call. What quote or saying do you want to leave with them from a leadership perspective that will help remember who Jay was?
You can have it all. You do not need to choose one or the other, and you can interpret that however you like.
Fantastic.
Okay. In fact, I think that's a brilliant line to leave it on. When you agree, Albert, I think that's a great line to leave. And wow, what a fantastic discussion. Thank you, Jay.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It really has been an absolute delight to get the opportunity to speak to you both again. It's been a wild ride since the heady days of being a grad in TSS, and you set me up for a really wonderful career.
We always knew you were going places. We always knew you were. But look, congratulations, Jay, where you are today. I've got a list here that I could, of all the things that you've done and who you are and what you've got going on, and the fact that for those of you that are listening and not watching, Jay hasn't stopped smiling the whole time. Right? And I don't believe that is a facade, right? Because there's something Jay does to run her life and to still be in this frame of mind. So thank you for the lessons that you've brought to our audience here. And I'll leave Neil to close us off. Jay, great to see you.
Yeah, no, fabulous. Thanks, Jay. And just closing off with our audience. So please like the podcast, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and just give us your feedback and comments, please. Any feedback, any comments is gratefully received, or other things you'd like us to talk about. And also, if you'd like help with leadership coaching at any point, please reach out to us, because we've still got the offer of a free leadership coaching session for anybody who'd like to take up on that. But great to see you both, and have a fab rest of the week.
Thanks very much.
You too.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks,
All the best.
Bye.
Take care.